meeting started. I'm going to call this meeting to order. If you would, follow along with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, we get a roll call?
Yes. Denham. Here. Fenton. Fenton. LeBlanc. Pinkley.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Yancey.
Here.
Stepp.
Here.
Milton.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We will be, prior to, I'll save that for when we introduce. First agenda item, Ben, you have things you'd like to share and report?
I would like to introduce, not my replacement, Sheree Pfeiffer, taking over as the finance director, and she'll be working with me real close, along with Jolynn.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I got to talk to some of you this morning. My name is Sheree Pfeiffer, and like Ben said, I am the new finance director for the city of Branson. Just to give you a little bit of background information on me and who I am and where I'm from. I just moved to Branson from Harrison, where I lived the last 20 years. I am married to my husband for 22 years. He's an outside sales rep. I have 2 boys. My oldest is a freshman in college. He's playing football for Line College. And my other one's a junior at Branson High School. And they have their first game this Friday against Joplin. So go Pirates. And let's see, I graduated from College of the Ozarks with an accounting degree. I am a CPA as well. My first 8 years, I went to work at FedEx Freight in their accounting department. I moved myself up to they promoted me to a senior accountant. With FedEx, I did all types of accounting. We did corporate accounting, general ledger accounting, cash management, project management. I worked on mergers, acquisitions, and international accounting. My role prior to working for the city of Branson, I worked at the Area Agency on Aging for over 8 years. With them, I did fund accounting, nonprofit accounting. I helped them with process improvements and to better utilize their existing accounting software. And now I've been at the city of Branson for almost 2 weeks, and I must say, just the atmosphere here is amazing. I don't know if you noticed my welcome sign when you came in, but everybody's been so welcoming and so kind and so friendly, and I got to sit in a lot of meetings with all different levels of the city, and I must say there's just this positive attitude, and there's just passion, and you can hear when everybody talks that the love that they have for the city, and I'm so excited to be part of this team, so thank you.
So earlier I shared with Sheree that her 8 years of experience with working with the aging will come in handy as we interact.
We also warned her that you're sharp as a tack. You can't use that as an excuse, Mayor.
I would like to start off in thanking Pam Yancey and Alex. They were involved with the interviewing process. And what they shared about your interview process and your work experience, your mindset of coming from Harrison is exact mindset of Branson, right? It's that Midwest, wholesome, you're into openness and transparency. I think you're going to fit in just fine. Ben will share, I think, a little bit of Ben Baker Tilley's continued role. But I wanted to welcome you. You've already had the opportunity, like you said, to meet a lot of the directors, and you are very, very welcomed. It's a good time to be at the city of Branson. So thank you very much. And thank you, Alex and Pam.
My pleasure to get to know her, and her heart really impressed me, and I knew she would be a great culture fit. So so excited for you to be here.
Ben?
So our role is not going to change for the foreseeable future. Cherie and I will be running the department and the finances. We've split it up since we're mid-budget. And I promised her I would not abandon her on the budget next year for '25. That's the reason she's still here. Because it's like drinking from a fire hydrant, right? But we've got a great finance staff, fantastic. I think she plugs in really well with these guys. And it's just to the moon now. We've got a lot going on with the ERP implementation. Cherie being a CPA, we've got Cherie and Jolene with all the background knowledge. But she brings a fresh set of eyes to what we do and what we've always done and how we can change it. I know the finance staff has been looking at that regularly for a year now. But we've got somebody besides me to sit in those meetings, can focus on how things get implemented and knock the trees down so the finance staff can do what they do. But yeah, she's a keeper.
Yeah. And let me just briefly say, Jolene, you are so appreciated for what you do in our accounting department. Yeah, it's very much appreciated. And I know there's been a lot of work thrown your way. This ERP probably takes up a couple minutes a day. Just, yeah, small amount. Exciting to see that when it's, as it rolls out, right? And Ben, before we continue, I'd also like Alex. Alex is new to the committee. I've met Alex and had a few conversations with him. Extremely impressed with his knowledge, his background, his education, and most importantly, his heart. Straight up, straight shooter. Branson will experience a lot of Alex's leadership as we continue down this road. So Alex, you want to share a little bit?
Yeah, thank you again, Mayor. I'm blessed to get to be here. I'm a firm believer in buying in and being a part of the system. So I've been a beneficiary of the system here. And so I don't believe in just taking. I think that integrating and contributing is a vital part. So from my background as a military officer, from my time being a professor at C of O to now, I want to take everything I've been equipped with, and those mentors have taken all that time to invest in me and turn that back over to everybody else. I got 4 kids that are going to be going through Branson schools. We're going to be here. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. So as long as you want to put up with me, I'll give you everything I got to give.
That's great. When he says a military officer, I can't help myself. He was in the Army. Speaking as a Marine. They say there's never a former Marine, right? Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It means a lot.
Ben, any finances you want to share?
Nothing at all.
No? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we've got a process for you today. Obviously, we got to approve the finance committee minutes and the disbursements, but I did want to make sure that, just to remind this committee, and if the new folks don't know, your role is really to acknowledge on the, go ahead.
Excuse me, Ben, I don't have the agenda in front of me, but before we move on, let's go ahead and approve.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
So
Oh, thank you.
the next item is the purchase over $50,000. But just as a reminder, your role as a committee is to acknowledge that information that's been given to you. More detail than this actually goes to the Board of Aldermen. But what you guys see is really some of the more important projects and the bigger checks that come through. We don't want to waste your time with the little ones. It's the reason the committee decided to go higher than 50,000. There are other things, like Kendall's going to come up and talk about water sewer utility rates. And what we're asking there is just a recommendation from this body to move it forward to the Board of Aldermen. But the way I'm used to using the Finance Committee is really kind of get down in the weeds a little bit. So you're educated about what's going on. When we get to the board level, we've got more people than just us that have looked under the hood on some of this stuff. And when we go through the reports, I'll add more to that, but that'll be at the end. So on the checks, we've got two of them since we didn't meet last month, June and July. This is the June one. I'd like to say there's not significant items in here, but there's a check for 1.2 million on workers' compensation premiums, but you know, that is typical as we move forward. The second one, the top one, SMG, the annual incentive fee, that goes over to the convention center. You can see paving that's coming through. The one, Great River Associates is a Highway 76 project that they've been working on, segments 1 and 2. That is obviously a longer story, but some of the payments come through on those too.
Any members of the board have any questions on these checks? If you do, those that have interacted with Ben knows that he has the detail on everything up there, so if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and your questions will be answered. Hearing no questions, I'm trusting we need to approve this or accept it.
Accept it, yeah.
Make a motion to accept?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Ben.
So the next item is utility rate model, and Kendall will come up and walk through that with you. I want to just let you know this is your first budget item coming through. The rate model is what drives his budget. So what we'll do is based on what the feedback you guys give us and then the full board gives us, we'll make sure this is entered into his budget and we'll move forward. So Kendall won't be in front of you a lot during the budget workshops, only because he's in front of you now. So ask really hard questions.
Hello, Kendall.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
My clicker here. It's hard to believe that we're already to this point in the year, but time has flown, and as our current theme is to move at the speed of business, we've been chugging along quite fast this year, it seems like. So we're here right now, and so what I'd like to do is provide you with a little bit of a history or historical information about how we go about figuring our rates for the city of Branson water sewer systems. So a little bit of history is we consulted with an engineering firm back in 2011, and since then we've used this rate model to assess and appropriate proper funds to keep us operational. So each year we maintain that model by assessing upcoming expenses. The model is actually projected out to a 20-year span, and we hone in on the next 5 years to really achieve the goals that's in mind for the system. And we assess life cycle trends of equipment. We assess new regulatory changes that are coming down from those agencies, and those could cause major equipment upgrades, or it also could cause us to add additional personnel. So we also assess market pricing. So inflation of cost and our chemicals and equipment greatly affect the model outcome as well. And I also like to highlight that we have our funding sources. So we have our tourism tax. This tourism tax was created to traditionally fund large capital projects. For example, such as treatment facility expansions and upgrades, or could be water and sewer main extensions or replacements, for example, like our 76 corridor improvements, or even our upcoming neighborhood improvements. We also have water and sewer rates. So rates funds operation and maintenance of the systems. It's personnel cost, services, commodities, and equipment replacements. We also seek grant funding. As you know, we have our Compton Drive flood wall protection project underway, and that was a $13 million grant we received. And then we also have sewer sales tax funding that we apply for each year for qualifying sewer projects. So with this model itself, we had a lot of discussion last year in the Finance Committee meeting and the Board of Aldermen meeting about different approaches of how to assess or how to distribute the rate increases amongst residential and commercial, and how to use the tourism tax. So with this year, I went with the same methodologies we accepted last year in itself. So with that, I'll start my slides here.
Hey, Kendall.
Yes.
So just to note, we've put off making rate increases, for a while. And the fees and rates that we currently have been charging are not even close to being able to keep up with the cost of what it costs us to do, to provide the water and sewer, correct?
Yeah,
Or
historically, we've tried to aim for a minimal rate increase each year to try to keep it consistent for residences and commercial establishments. However, what that creates is a backlog of equipment replacements. It postpones many projects, and so we get to a snowball effect, so to speak, that eventually you come to a cross in the road. You've got to choose, how you're going to pursue or proceed, and so plus it also, we had a pause during the COVID pandemic as well. So many of our pumps and equipment took a pause and replacements, and then costs went through the roof as well. So we're fighting the inflation, and in our industry, we've seen chemical costs raise as much as 30 to 90% in some cases. It just depends. It's all over the place right now on those goods and commodities. So it's been challenging for the rate structure as we've traditionally seen it. So with last year, we did a 12% increase and a 12% on water and a 10 on sewer. And I laid out the 5-year plan of what it would look like for the next 5 years, and it was still set for a significant rate increase for the next coming years. However, as you'll see in a little bit, we've been able to chop that down a little bit from what I showed you guys last year, which I'm excited about. However, we'll get into that more here in a minute.
Right. I think what I want everybody to understand, this wasn't taken lightly. This was something that, has really, we've tried to avoid it, right?
Yes.
But there just comes a point when we have to make a decision, a good business decision on that. So anyway, kudos to you for, digging into this. And so ready to hear what you've got.
Appreciate
to
that.
say.
Thank you. There we go. All right. So again, we have our water capitals, which these water capitals are funded out of rates. So this would be our mechanical equipment replacements and also vehicle and equipment replacements such as backhoes and bobcats and things of that nature. So for the next 5 years, you'll see on our equipment replacements, we have approximately $3.7 million. And then on a vehicle replacement cost, and the water side, we'll have approximately $4.4 million. And so we're averaging roughly, with those combined together, we're averaging around $900,000 a year in capital that is funded by rates. And on the sewer side, we have approximately $1.1 million yearly that we're averaging for the sewer capitals. And I want to also highlight our capitals that are funded by tourism dollars. So the tourism dollars the tourism tax itself was created to take the brunt of the load because we are a unique city or a unique municipality where a lot of our major infrastructure is very costly, not only due to the topography. We love the hills and the valleys that we have in our area, and there comes with a trade-off. So we have a little bit more infrastructure required to operate in that type of topography. But also we have our tourism industry, that tourism tax was designed to take the brunt of the load there. So I wanted to highlight our next 5 years of capital projects for both water and sewer. So roughly we have just under $60 million in the next 5 years that we project to spend. And these are projects like 76 Corridor, could be our neighborhood improvements, also our sewer collection rehab, and something new I did this year, placed into the 2024 tourism tax budget would be our water meter infrastructure upgrades. Typically, we've funded those out of rates, but we've tried to spread that out over a 10-year replacement program, but what we're finding is the technology, the auto read systems are advancing much quicker than we can get those change-outs to take place in. And so I would like to hit that in a 2-year span. It's 1.5 million for 2024 and 1.5 million for 2025 to completely change out our meter system. Many of them are overdue for change out. They're over 10 years old. This would actually create a new system, so we don't have to operate off of 2 read systems. We'd have a new system and our old system until we phase out. And so that's a large load, and we'd actually have to have a contractor come in and help us with those change outs. So I've took that out of the rates and placed that burden on the tourism tax to help soften the rates some, is what I was trying to get to there. What I'd like to highlight too on the tourism tax is we do historically capture approximately 12.5 million each year for that. So with having just under $60 million of projects for the next 5 years, that outcome or that projected outcome is roughly 62.5 million in the next 5 years, with 25% of that going to the marketing, which is roughly $15 million. Theoretically, we'd have approximately $46 million to go towards those $60 million projects over the next 5 years. So at some point in time, we're going to have conversations with Cherie and Ben and have to look at our tourism dollars and whether we're going to have to start bonding our projects, which was what was originally talked about when the tax was passed for the second time. Is there's several projects that would end up causing us to have to bond to be able to accomplish those goals. And I simply highlight that because we've talked about a lot of the capital that is funded through rates and moving some of that over the tourism dollars. However, there's not enough tourism dollars coming in to pay for it all up front. So we just need to do a good assessment of that in the upcoming year here to project a good plan for us. So I'd like to highlight our water rates for the next 5 years. This is what I've projected through the model. So for 2024, I'm projecting a 10% water increase in rates. Last year, when I presented the 5-year projection, it was projected to be 12%. So we have chopped that down a little bit from what we thought was going to end up being for this year. And what that would do is put us at roughly about 37% reserves in our water account itself. Now, what that looks like is there's a lot of numbers on here, and I just share this with you because I want to dive into a little bit here, or just touch base with what that would look like on the water bill side. So, for example, like your 5/8 meter, you'll see down below. In 2023, the base rate is $11.77. A 10% increase would cause that to go to $12.95. And then further down the screen, where it's residential water rate per 1,000 gallons, it'd go from $3.02 a gallon to $3.32 a gallon. And on the commercial side, it'll go from $4.49 a gallon to $4.93 a gallon. And I'll have some slides that'll show what that'll look like on some average billings.
Before we move on,
Yes.
I must say this. This is troubling for me. Our residents pay through the nose on taxes, primarily the 1% TCD tax, right? So every time one of our residents goes to Walmart, right, they're paying more than what other communities charge. And I have always been a proponent, as when I started as an alderman, that to seek ways to subsidize the fees to our residents, water and sewer, to help them offset some of the other fees that they just have to pay because we're in a tourism business. So I truly appreciate you being a director and you're looking at the math. I truly appreciate Pam's comments of, guys, we haven't raised the rates. We've been falling behind on the operations expenses, which is very, very true. My mindset is I am much more comfortable with these rates to be subsidized by other means. I'm not sure where that comes from. I'm going to challenge Kathy to get with you, Kendall, and with Cherie and with Ben, and come up with alternatives. And here again, I truly know that for the math to work, for the city to bring in enough revenue to cover operating expenses, this is what must be done. The challenge is remove the burden from our residents and subsidize it with other sources. My first place to go is tourism tax. If our residents, if we didn't have 10 million visitors and people lived in Branson, we wouldn't have the high amount of expenses that we currently have. It would be considerably less, marketed less, right? Yes. And so because of that, I'm just, I'll tell you what, as a mayor, I think that those that cause our operating expenses to increase, which is primarily tourism, a bulk of it is the amount of tourists that we have is the reason why we need to cover our operating expenses. So just on that basis alone, and the first thing I'd like you to look at is, and forgive me for getting into the weeds, but if we did not maintain a 39% reserve, I believe we're required to maintain a 20% reserve. So if we were maintaining a 20%, I would have to assume that that would dramatically affect requiring a 10% increase to maintain a higher reserve than we need. I'm a big believer in having reserves. I'm just really opposed to a 10% increase to maintain a almost double amount of reserve that's required. And I believe, go ahead.
I'd like to share a little bit on that.
Please.
So if you look at the 5-year projection, you'll start to see, except for in 2025, you'll start to see a downward trend in the reserve. So as you get out to year 2028, it's down to a 26% reserve. If you even look further out, it gets a little closer to that 20% level. And so if we didn't go with the 10%, say we dropped it down to a 4 or 5% and get that reserve amount closer down to that 20% range, with projected revenues and operating cost, it would cause us to have to increase in 2025 we'd have a greater rate increase in 2025 just to maintain the 20% level. So what that 10% doing for this year or for 2024 is doing is to steady that drop down to that 20% range. It's trying to limit the impact of the next year. rates to the customers themselves. And I also like to also back up and say that the tourism tax is helping. Last year, when I presented numbers, if we didn't have the tourism tax, we would be looking at close to a 200% increase in water just to maintain operations. So the tourism is helping in itself. On the sewer side, we're doing better. If we didn't have the tourism tax, it'd be around 60 to 70% increase on the sewer side. So the tourism dollars is helping, so to speak. I'm open to ideas, I'm open to collaboration and to see what we can do to try to ease up the residences even more. However, they are seeing the benefits of the tourism tax at this point with that. So.
And I appreciate that. And I see it also. I think our community sees it. Kathy, I'm going to need your assistance on this. I think that, and just ballparking, this is not based on any calculations. I would like to see for the residential water increases, something around 3%.
Okay. And we can look at that. What that would do is on the commercial side, we'd have to elevate that instead of a 10% for the commercial customers, it would be more like a 13 or 14% for commercial customers to offset that reduction on the residential side.
Real quick question, and I'm going to ask Ben a question, and I hate to have you get up for this. The tourism tax that we generate, is it restricted that those funds can only be used for capital improvements?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's actually written in code where it's the 25-75 split, 25 for marketing and 75 is only for capital. It can't be used for operations at all.
Okay, but can we, staying within the rules, can we use that money when we talk about capital expenses? Can we use that to replace water meters, for example?
When we ask city legal
Yeah.
that same question last year, the answer was yes. As long as it's infrastructure and part of the system.
So is there anything in the operating expenses that can be paid out of the tourism dollars?
Yes, so that'd be the capital that is funded by rates is in these two slides here. On the water side, we have approximately $900,000 on average a year that we spend out of rates for capital. That'd be like pump replacements and blowers and electrical components and things of that nature that it's on an ongoing replacement due to their life cycles. So we have roughly $900,000 on the water side and then $1.1 million on the sewer side.
Okay. I don't want to get into the weeds and have a lengthy discussion of how to solve it. The challenge is, Kathy, the challenge is, would you please explore all the avenues out there that we could use to continue to subsidize the water and sewer rates? And I want to remind everybody, when the tourism tax first went on the ballot, the community was told, if you approve this tourism tax, then it will be used to keep your rates lower. If we didn't have the number of tourists, our operating expenses would not be this high. In fact, I believe, and I don't know if I'm mistaken here, I believe our city went a number of years with a zero increase in water and sewer because of the promise made to the community, if you pass this tourism tax, they did not see an increase. And so I'd just like to challenge you to go back and see what we can do to reform this.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to back up just a little bit and tell you, one of the many things I appreciate about Kendall and his team and how closely they've been working with Ben is that they've already been asking themselves and challenging themselves on that very point. Kendall doesn't come
giddy with excitement over the idea of raising rates. In fact, it really torments him. He really operates this really crucial arm of city government like it's his own business. And there's a double-edged sword here. Maybe that's not the right analogy to use, but were it not for the tourism tax, what Kendall was just saying earlier, the rates would have skyrocketed by several %. And were there not tourists here, we would have seen the same kind of capital needs, because a plant is a plant, whether it's operating 10 million gallons a day or 3 million gallons a day, the operational costs are very similar to that. So let's just say we had less people that are flushing toilets and, using the water every day. That doesn't negate the need for regular capital infrastructure improvements, new regulatory requirements that come into play that drive costs as well, and more investment. So I don't know that you would not see a dollar per dollar benefit like what it sounds like you should be able to see as a result of that. It's still a bricks and mortar operation that's going to require a lot of maintenance and upkeep and repairs. Same with the well pumps, et cetera. So I don't know that you'd see that much of a difference. But I will tell you also, we've had the luxury of enjoying the 0% rate increases for several years on that statement, right? What we've not had the luxury of doing is making sure our equipment is operationally optimized. And it terrifies me. There is a lot of stuff that has gone by the wayside for far too many years, and the nightmare scenario for me is a failure. And so that's why they are very judicious about being sure we pace out the appropriate maintenance and repairs when we absolutely need it. And we're still playing catch up from the last, 10 years of deferred replacements and maintenance. And to me, Mayor, the 10% increase, and we don't take it lightly, but I think it's a sound investment to make sure that we don't have a catastrophic event with our drinking water system or our sewer systems. And I trust these guys have hashed it and hashed it and hashed it. I don't know that there's a better plan to bring you. It's not that I'm not willing to do it. I'll certainly do that at your direction. But I'm very doubtful I'd be able to bring you back a better plan. I think this is as conservative as we can get it. I trust these guys have just run the numbers up one side and down the other. And to me, the what if we defer something because we don't want to raise rates, we want to raise them 4% instead of 10%, is a price that I think should be really thought through. But I will proceed on your guidance.
Okay, my guidance is, please go back to the drawing board. And I really, really understand what you're saying. What sticks in my craw is the maintenance portion of our water and sewer is substantially higher to operate it with 10 million visitors versus no visitors. Are you shaking your head no at me? We purchase more chemicals. Is that fair? We have more pumps that need to be maintained. Is that fair? We wouldn't have all these pumps if we didn't have this many tourists. There are expenses in our operations that would be out of line if we only were serving the residents. So I appreciate it. I know and I appreciate everything that Kendall does. I would like you to go back and revisit it. And I'm not only speaking as the mayor, I'm verily confident you're going to hear the same message from your Board of Aldermen.
Kendall, do you remember, and I'm putting you on the spot, which I don't like to do you remember when we were comparing to our sewer rates and water rates to neighboring communities? And not that this justifies anything, but I just wanted to give perspective on the affordability factor that Branson residents are able to enjoy, I think in great part to the tourism tax supplementation that's been going on for many years here, that we've been able to keep those rates and those increases from skyrocketing like other neighboring communities have. That's the first thing I wanted to ask. And the second thing is we're all subject right now to the skyrocketing impacts of inflation, whether it's chemicals, equipment, availability of equipment, wait times for equipment, labor costs as well, getting contractors to be able to show up and do the work, and they're able to now name their price. if we want them to show up. So there's a lot of challenges that we're facing. And that's why, and I appreciate everything you're saying and not arguing at all, but I was relieved to see we were only going to have to increase rates by 10% based on all the things going on and all the big construction projects that we've got going on in Branson. I was terrified to see what we were going to be looking at for water and sewer. So originally last year, when Kendall made the presentation, he thought we were going to be faced with a 12% increase for this year. Instead, we were able to chop that down to 10%. We'll try and go back and see if we can get it down lower, but that's always his goal, is to be as low as possible for the impact to the community. That drives him every day in everything he does in his operations. But if you'd like us to do that, we could probably call it a day. I mean, I would think, right? There's no sense going through the rest of it if you want us to go
Well,
back.
I'll
and
tell
look
you,
up.
I'm asking for you to take this direction. And it's not just me. If you bring this presentation to the Board of Aldermen, I'm just trying to cut to the chase.
Yeah.
Because you're going to hear the same thing from the majority of your board. We need to think outside the box. We need to do things that we traditionally haven't done. We just need to look at it from a different lens.
Okay. We will work on that then.
Okay. Yep, certainly so. Do we need to proceed?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can adjourn if you
All
like,
right.
or whatever else is on the agenda.
What's I know we're in budget season.
Yeah.
And what's the timing of all this?
Ben, would you like to? I'll let you.
So the thought was that we get your input today, which is exactly what we're getting, and then come back to you in September, come back to the full board in September with the public hearing for whatever rate increases come back. And this was the initial feedback. Because of timing and the fact that this has got to get set in the budget so we can do the rest, I would still want to advance on that schedule in coming back to the full board with Kendall's public hearing. And I would suspect the second meeting in September.
So we have a public notification process we have to do. Hillary, is that 2 weeks ahead of the meeting or 4? Just ahead of the meeting? Okay. So I know we got to do a notification on the public hearing. So as long as we have enough time to kick that out, because we got to have those rates in that notification.
So
we
my
could call-
suggestion, Ben, would be to keep this moving and to stay within our budgeting timeframe. I would ask to call a special meeting for this finance committee and not wait a month for these meetings. And I would also like to get input from the other committee members on this finance board.
We need it in a week, I think, Ben. We need to do the special meeting probably in a week, I would think.
Let me hear from the board if I can. Alex, anything?
One of the things I was going to ask, gentlemen, I'm still getting my head wrapped around how the process works, but it sounds like from the tourism tax standpoint that it was meant to help offset costs to the residents. Output's output, in my opinion. If you run not to oversimplify the process, if you run a machine with more output, it's going to put more wear and tear on it. I'm a firm believer in that. As an aviator, I've seen it on aircraft. But what I wonder is, was the reduction of rates or the freezing of rates based on the fact that we were fulfilling a promise and not off the merit of the tourism tax and how it was written? If so, is this data a fair representation of what was supposed to come? So like, although we're artificially low, that data is reflective of a decision that was made. So now it's the punishment's coming after the fact. So it's not really fair to the residents. And as a resident myself, I don't know, like that shows that we're lower, but it's lower because of the aftermath of other planning. So double-edged sword, but I agree finding other options is something to explore because you're gonna have to explain that to the residents on why it's coming. Firm believer in the output though, because I did a study on the actual wastewater treatment plant as part of my studies last semester. And it's impressive, 1.5 billion gallons of output, I believe I read, on an approximate output. That all attributes to machine and usage, so I understand too, though, it's like totality of the circumstance, but you're gonna have to negotiate that, but I think the data has some, there's some skewing there based on just decisions that were made to honor a promise, but that's still, there's accountability there, I think, and figuring out a creative solution because a decision was made to freeze it without considering the second and third orders of effect. That would be what I would.
Thank you,
I'd be
Alex.
sure.
Ruth?
Well, perception's reality, and right now our citizens are being so unnecessarily taxed with other things, and this isn't necessary. However, maybe relooking at it to find different avenues to where we can stay in the same ballpark, but I believe that being able to match this with other dollars, if that's a possibility, and I know that the mayor is asked to do that, I think that that's a good idea, because it boils down to our residents, our taxpayers, and yeah, if a promise was made, all these promises are always made when taxes, when we want to increase taxes, and instead of facts being provided, sometimes they're not provided at the time, so looking for other ways, I think, is a good idea. I agree with you, Mayor. I don't know how, but looking at it, yes.
Michael?
Well, Mayor, would it be appropriate for this committee to hear Kendall's presentation and then let this committee make a recommendation on that?
I think one of the suggestions of, we really don't need to continue this presentation because it's going to be based on these rates that we're talking about. I believe when I looked at the rest of the slides, it just continues the mindset of these increases. But,
Well,
go ahead.
we're advisory in nature, and so this is just a recommendation to the board.
Yeah.
So that's the end. I mean, that's how I see it.
Well, there's nothing wrong with having more information, so Michael, if you'd like to continue with the presentation, I say we listen to it.
Well, that was just a suggestion.
Okay. Ruth, do you agree or no?
I don't see why we should go through this if we don't
Okay.
have any other numbers to work with.
Pam?
I agree. We have to do our due diligence to make sure that we're not adding any unnecessary burden on our citizens of our community, of our city. What concerns me, Kendall, is even with these increases, when you showed the slide that said, what was it in 2027, 2028, we're starting to get really close to our 20% reserve. That's concerning to me. So while, no, I do not like increases in rates any more than anyone else, and I think always look for every opportunity there is to offset that or find another way. And so I'm very supportive of y'all going back to the table and looking to see if there's some other way that we can offset this. The reality may be, there may be no other ways. I don't know. But I am supportive of looking at that. And so I know this isn't an easy task, and I know we've got a crunch time frame, but I am supportive of that. And again, my concern is that if we adjust these numbers, how quick do we get to that 20% reserve? And what does it look like after that? I mean, and how do we keep that reserve without increasing rates at some point? So,
Pam, that's an excellent point. And just for clarity, I am nowhere near suggesting we put the city at any financial risk, that we reduce our reserves from the 20%. I am not, that's not in the cards. On Pam's point, In 2028, we're down to 26%. I'm looking for other ways to keep a reserve, no risk at all, keep the reserve, but other ways to supplement this. And Kathy, just a quick response. I know that as I've been an alderman, we have seen charts every single year showing that our community's water and sewer rates are lower than a whole bunch of communities. My comment was then, and my comment is still today. That's very true, but I don't know that that's a fair comparison. When we simply compare Hollister, other communities around us, and we look at the water sewer rate that our residents pay, there's no other community that we compare to where the residents also pay a 1% tax, retail tax. So from a homeowner's out-of-pocket expense, I don't think it's fair just to look at water, sewer, water, sewer. It's costing them more.
Understood.
Alex?
Yeah, the term that comes to mind, Mayor, as I think about this, and I don't want to like overshoot all the effort that goes in. I completely understand, and if there's anything I can do to support, I'm more than willing to help. I won't just complain. I'll go to work for you too. Just tell me. But the buzz term that comes to my mind, I think it's going to be at the core of the residents, is proportionality. Like, is this proportionate to the visitors that are coming? We thrive on their coming to visit us and support us, but are they paying their? Is the proportionality and the rate comparison equitable? Where is the output of the system going? And that should tell you the line, like where the load should be placed on. And that might already be happening, so I don't want to say it's not, but proportionality is what I think when we keep throwing this conversation around is it proportionate? I think people are reasonable as long as it's proportional. And if they feel like it's excessive, like everyone hates taxes or they'll complain about it, but they can understand, be rational about proportionality. And I don't know that this gives credibility towards proportionality, or at least it could give folks the understanding that it's becoming increasingly the residents' problem to bring in the guests.
Thank you, Alex. And like I said, this isn't the time or place for us to try to come up with solutions, but what I think I just heard from Alex was, what would the numbers look like if 11% increase went to the commercial side, or a 12% increase went to the commercial side? What would that look like from our resident side?
Sure. And we can definitely go back to the drawing board and figure those numbers and come up with another solution.
Hey, Kendall, Mayor, if you don't mind, I'm trying to remember, and you went over all this with me, I can't recall it right now, but say on an average homeowner's bill, because I'm looking at like, what is the impact of the 10% increase on, say, an average family's bill? Because I think that's important perspective too. I just couldn't remember.
So for residential, the combined difference per month for a water sewer bill would be $2.57
For the month.
for the month for 5,000 gallons of usage.
Thank you.
So the biggest cost is going to get passed on to commercial.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, the commercial loading I believe on the water side, our revenue intake is approximately 75% of it is commercial sourced, and then on the sewer side, it's around 67% of commercial of our revenue is funded through the commercial side.
So the greatest burden of the increase is going to be carried by the businesses.
Correct, yeah. If you look at our rate comparisons with other cities, and we have done rate comparisons with cities such as like Myrtle Beach, they have taxes, they have impact taxes and tourism taxes similar to ours. We did do a chart on that a couple of years ago. I can drag that back out and provide that information as well, because again, I think we fell within the mid-range of that assessment of those cities that we could compare. And what's challenging is when you in the whole rate comparison with other cities, just back up for a second. our staff, every year, we look at 90 different cities and perform a rate study. And we do this, for one, just to kind of see where we end up landing at. On the residential, we're on the very low side of those 90. I say within the 10, probably the 10% range. On the commercial side, we fall mid-range with all those cities. Where I was trying to go with that is, I was trying to think back, but apologize, my brain is dropped out here. We had, when you compare apples to apples, what's challenging is our infrastructure is different than many other cities within the rate study itself. So we have surface water drinking plants. Most people are off of wells. Wells are much cheaper to operate and maintain. However, with our area and the demand that's on the water systems within the area, not only the city of Branson water system, but our neighbors to the north, our neighbors to the south, which solely rely on wells, they draw down that aquifer. And that was the whole intent and the purpose of building the Meadows Water Treatment Facility, was to be sustainable for our area, because there's not enough groundwater to sustain us. And so those surface water plants come at a cost. And so it's hard to compare apples to apples in rates, because we have higher operating costs compared to those other facilities, because just the nature of where we're at with our system.
Yeah, that's very fair.
So-
Yeah.
Again, we'll go back and look at it again. It's a matter of, in my eyes, is a matter of looking at how much of the rate-funded capital we can move over to tourism. However, again, I tried to highlight the historical dollars that's been coming through on the tourism side. It's just not enough to sustain both. It's not enough to sustain the current project projection for tourism projects right now with the methodology that we've been using for several years, and add the capital that's been funded out of rates.
Yeah.
And two, we've also been dipping into the tourism fund for inter loans for, like, say, fire truck and for the campground. That all takes from that piggy bank. And so that we have to decide is what's the right plan for that tourism tax, and what's our future with it. So that's be a great discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, I know from a methodology standpoint and just comparing the math, I couldn't agree more with you. I guess I'm just asking to maybe think of a new methodology. And I'll tell you, this isn't just one person speaking. I'm trying to preempt, you present this to the Board of Aldermen whenever that's scheduled for approval to fit within our budgeting timeframe, and we'll be going through this process in 2 months versus going through it today.
No, I appreciate that, always. I mean, that's what we rely on this committee for, is to give us feedback. I guess I'm just hopeful if we're able to say cut it down from 10% to 5%, that people find more of an appetite of, $1.04 and 24 cents, for water and sewer, instead of the $2.09 and the 48 cents a month. I don't know if I guess I'm just saying, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze? And that's obviously up to the committee, but to go from $2.50 a month more for your water and sewer combined down to $1.28 more, is that going to make as much of an impact maybe as what you're hoping to make, I guess, is all I'm asking. So, but we will route through it. Right, Kendall?
That's right. We appreciate the comments
Yep.
and feedback. That's what you guys are here for, and we will act appropriately.
So Michael, if you don't mind, to finish up the rest of the agenda for timing, if we can
That'd be
move
fine,
on.
thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Kendall, thank you.
So I believe the next thing is the dashboard that we'll go through. And I do want to give you a heads up. I was excited to have the transparency website, give you an overview of that. But Chad and I were looking at it before, and there's something wrong with the website. I was on it a couple days ago, and it was working great. I'm like, these guys are gonna love this. And then Chad just told me, nope, not gonna work. So we'll go back and get that
That
live.
next month.
Yeah, we'll get that live. If we have a meeting here in the next couple of weeks, get that fixed and
Okay,
walk you
yeah.
through it. Staff's done a great job on that.
Yeah, and I know the path we're headed, and I'm anxious to see what additional information that we're putting on our website.
Yeah.
Our community is going to just love that.
It's far more than what, I mean, the only way I could describe the information that's gonna go on there is buried in a 300-page budget that
Yeah.
even I don't read.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that, Chad, and we obviously compliment our IT department. I can appreciate how complex that is, so having a hiccup like this, fully understandable. I know the end goal is going to be what we all want. And
I think it's the ClearGov's
Right,
portion
yeah,
of it.
so we
They're the
don't
ones.
program that, it's with the third party.
Sure,
But I appreciate the compliment.
Exactly,
But we'll
exactly.
communicate with them and figure out what the deal is and get it resolved, and we'll demo that next month, or next meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the next thing is the dashboard. So what, we started doing this last year in an attempt, well, let me back up a little bit. Also on the packet is the financial statements, which I guess you got to be educated, like three of us, and the two of them sitting up there knowing how to read that thing and get something out of it, right? So what we started doing last year was actually giving you more of a dashboard of what the key indicators would look like. And you'll hear this in October when we get together for the budget. But there's certain revenues that come through the city that really drive operations. Obviously, utility revenue is one of them, a big one. Sales tax, tourism tax are the biggest. And that really makes or breaks what we do as a city and the operations we provide, capital that's out there as well. So we make sure to track these on a regular basis. And a lot of these charts have been through this committee's eyes, and each time that somebody's made a suggestion, we've added it to it, and it's just become a better graph or better, communication. So as you see a different item, especially for Michael and Alex, let us know, we can add to it. And it's been a great process. So sales tax, through July, we're still up 5.5% year-to-date. Month over month, it's been 15%, I'm sorry, year-to-date is 5.5. It's 15% over budget, what we expected through the end of July in budget. It's still 15% because we purposely budgeted something low, not knowing what the recession was going to do. When you look at August, the year-to-date actually drops to 3.2% increase. It's not a decrease, it's an increase. And that's really where we expected it to be, is that 3% increase month over month, or actually year-to-date. From year to year, we ought to see that normalize. In the last 2 years, we've been enjoying double-digit sales tax increases. But keep in mind, 3.2% is still higher than what some of the record receipts we've got coming into the city. It's still a really high number. And we've taken that into account in our budget and our forecast.
Excuse me, Ben, I just recently read an article in a local paper that said that our tax revenues are down for August. Do you know what that was based on?
Yeah, when I went back, I read the same article.
Okay.
The numbers in it was factual. The way it was presented was a little confusing.
Okay.
So what they were talking about was August to August was down. So if you compare August 23 to August 22, it was down fairly significantly.
Okay.
That's the reason we went from 5.5 to 3.2 as a growth rate.
Okay.
But we expect that to come through. And we'll touch on it here in a minute. We've got a leading indicator also in here that could maybe change some of that narrative too.
Yeah, so the month of August was down compared to last
Yeah,
August.
and that
Year-
could be a couple of things. That could be.
Year-to-date, our increase has been reduced, but it's still an increase.
It's still high, it's still, yeah, it's expected, right? And the one thing that the public needs to understand is we're 15% ahead of budget, higher than what we expected in the budget.
Yeah.
Our operations are driven off of a budget.
Budget, yeah.
And so that gap right there is creating a safety, if you will. So we could be 3.2% over 22, but as long as we're well ahead of our budget, then we're in a safe territory.
Pam?
No, I was leaning
Okay.
in, listening with eagerness, Ben, just to listen to you explain that, so.
Thank you.
But thank you for clarifying that, because I think that had a different tone
Yeah.
out in the community as awareness or understanding exactly how the numbers really were looked at, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's the tone. The numbers were right. It's just the tone and some of the statements weren't right. But that's all right. We've got us sitting here. I'm more of an expert maybe than a reporter might be. I'm just saying, I've been doing it 30 years. So for the sales tax, we're headed to $15.4 million this year. We set the '23 budget at $13.4 million, and this is in the general fund. All right, so it's a good indication that our forecast was thankfully low, and that's kind of where we want to be. We want to come in with a surplus, and not a surplus just to stack cash away. It's a surplus that can be contributed toward capital, and that's what we expect. Some of that to come back to this committee. On the tourism side, if you can scroll down to that one, this one is a little surprising. Year to date, we're up 4.9%. That one we expected to be way down because it's tourism driven, but it is staying high, and that's a great thing. But we're going to continue to track that. We're 49.7% over 2019. You think about that. That's a big number. That tells us it's not just the tourists coming in, but also additional businesses contribute to that sales tax, that tourism tax. And then again, just like we're 15% over budget, here we're 56% over budget on the tourism side. When Kendall mentioned earlier that we got 12 million that's allocated toward capital, that accounts for that 56%. So he's got current numbers in it. So anything that's in his model right now is actually taking that into account. The budget we had artificially low at 12.3 million. We're headed toward 18.1 million. And that's the total. Got to split it out 25, 75, 75 for capital. So that's where we're headed this year. Now that makes a difference in the long run too, because if we can maintain a 1% to 2% increase off of 18 million, that's much higher than what we used to have, which was 12 million. So that's a good number to work with moving forward. But again, that's all capital. It cannot be used for salaries or any operations whatsoever. If you scroll down a little more, you can see some of the indicators on the tourism tax. We split that out among some major categories: amusements, theaters, hotels, campground, nightly rentals, and restaurants. Last month, 2 months ago, some of these had a decrease, a year to date. And what I said then was, we haven't hit tourist season. Well, this is evidence that we've hit it because all of them are up. Year to date, they're all up over last year. I think the smallest increase is amusements at just under 0.5% increase year to date over last year. Over 19, we're 71% on amusements. When we look at theaters, we're 35% over 2019. And I keep repeating 2019 because it's a pre-COVID number. It's where that's the launch pad. When COVID hit, everything dropped, and we're headed back up again. And I'll eventually stop using 2019 as a base year. Hotels and motels are 27% over 19. It's up 2%. Campgrounds are up 7.3%. That was one of them that had a fairly sizable negative in June. But again, we're seeing that was April, or June was May's receipts. So we're seeing that tourism come through. That's an increase. Campgrounds, 68% over 2019. It's a big driver. Campgrounds, a lot of people come to stay in Branson and in campgrounds. Nightly rental is taking off. If you read the papers at all, you know that Airbnb and VRBOs, they've got commercials left and right. Nightly rental over last year is just under 9%. From 2019, it's 160% increase. So that's proliferating, and we're obviously working on that as well. Restaurants and concessions are more stable, 14% over 2019, 8% over last year.
Do we feel like we're capturing the majority of the nightly rentals? I know there's been some concerns that maybe some were not reporting or whatever.
Let's ask Kathy.
Do we, Kathy, I'm so sorry, don't hate me.
I would never. That's a very legitimate question. We've been working on engaging with a third-party entity to help us identify all of those properties in Branson. I've had some community members in different subdivisions and developments who have been asking those same questions. They're seeing how their neighbors are operating, and they're not sure they're paying their fair share of the taxes that are due to the community for that purpose. So we're all over it amongst the bazillion and 12 other things that we're all over right now, but we're definitely, we don't want to leave any money on the table.
Yeah, from what we've seen in other data, I think the answer to that, the clear answer is no. I don't think we've captured everything. And like Kathy said, we've got an RFP that we're evaluating the proposals right now. Matt Henry and an individual from our office went through the proposals and ranked them, come out really close to the top indicators. So my hope is to bring that back, meeting the next couple of weeks, bring it back to you guys.
So let me ask another question. So if I am operating a Airbnb or whatever, and I'm in the middle of a neighborhood,
Yep.
okay? If I haven't followed the process to register that or license that appropriately, I'm paying residential water and sewer rates.
Right.
Now, if I am licensed as a Airbnb or whatever, do I become a commercial where the water rates and sewer rates are concerned?
That's a really good question. I don't know how to answer that one, whether it's commercial or not. Do you, Julian? See, this is why you sat down.
Currently, we've been not doing that because we would have to change it. How our current system is, if somebody decides to sell that property, it would be very hard for us to switch it back to commercial, residential, because if somebody decides to buy it and just have it a vacation home and not as a rental property, yeah, it's still residential. Or there's a lot of people who buy it, they're just planning on having it as a vacation home, and that's how they report it to us, and then they start renting it out. And so how our current system is, and it's not something we have to ask Tyler, but maybe this is something that we can ask Tyler, how easy would it be at the time you're setting the customer up? But how our current system is, we'd actually have to go into the setup of each address to change it each time.
Well, it just seems like maybe we're leaving some money on the table on that, so.
Yeah, your point is valid. Because if you licensed as a Airbnb or or short-term rental, then that has a whole different stipulation and impact on the city than if it was just my house. But your point is valid, and that's why identifying how many that are out there is the first step that we've got to take, and then there's a bunch of policies that we need to obviously approach too, but identifying the universe is going to be the first step, and then we can start tackling some of the policy issues.
Yeah.
Our current process right now is that we base it on zoning. So there are even places like on Price Street right over here that are homes that people have switched back and forth between homes, but they're zoned commercial. So if you use that as a home, because it's zoned commercial, you pay a commercial rate.
Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Also, I mean, when these are operating within a residentially zoned neighborhood, I mean, it's in violation of our code too, so
Yeah.
those are things to look at as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
there's a
whole
lot of
myriad.
tentacles.
There
but
is.
But like Pam said, it would be more equitable if they were paying,
Right.
if they were paying commercial rates for water and sewer.
Right.
And in fairness, they should be paying the tourism tax, right? So as we sharpen up our accounting system, those
Yeah.
would be I know there's a lot of tentacles. Kathy and I have had several conversations on this.
Yep.
So there's a lot of tentacles. It's possibly a big rock. I mean,
Yep,
it may be something,
absolutely.
a significant difference. But it's not as easy as pulling a trigger. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Go ahead and scroll down and keep going. These two slides just show year-to-date, and it's not necessarily the numbers that are important, but that in the upper slide, you can see that there's a barely kind of a reddish-orange line. It's sitting right on top of the line from last year. We expected that slope to be a little lower, and it's still sitting right on that line from last year. I was surprised at last year's numbers, and sales tax is it's still moving in the same direction. Tourism tax is the same way. It's got a little bit of a gap between what was last year and this year, but it's still there, and it's still increasing on a regular basis. When we look at general fund right now is operating at a surplus, which makes sense because not all of our expenses come out on a routine monthly basis. So there's some expenses like capital that come out all at once. So this kind of takes that into account. This won't be where we end the year on the year to date. So there's some nuances to this, but this is as of the end of July. Water and sewer, the revenue and the expenses, the revenue's less than the expenses, but again, we haven't hit our big seasons for water. We're kind of sitting in it now with 100 and some degree weather. In Lawrence, Kansas, I heard it's 134 degrees. I'm sure their water bill's going through the roof. But as the weather comes in, it'll make a difference. Now, the next two down there is the budget to actual. We track things on obviously revenue versus expense, but we also look at it budget to actual. How close to the actual numbers are we coming? With 58% of the year ended, where 59% of the budget had been spent. When I look at the financials, all of the departments are well under 58%. So the 59 is made up of what we call non-departmental, and that's where we get or pay our workers' comp bill out or insurance bills. It comes out of one line or a couple lines that's not in a department. And as that one bill comes out, we eat up that entire budget. So that kind of makes it a little difference. But all the departments are under that 58%. And then, of course, you can see water and sewer expenses as well. So when we look at the general fund, and we're not going to show it here. You're fine where you're at. I just wanted to bring your attention to interest income. You read in the newspaper where interest CDs are at 5%, 6%, 4%. Our budget, which is an estimate based on prior years, was $372,000 in the general fund in interest income. We've blown that away right now. $449,000 is where we're at. That's halfway through the year. We still got another 5 months to go through. And the departments or the funds are all kind of seeing that same impact. So that's a very positive thing. The revenue where we're headed right now, if I were to put, and I don't put money on anything, I'm not a gambler, but if I was to put anything on where the general fund's going to end, our main operating fund, I'm looking at probably a $1 million surplus, not accounting for all the accruals and the GASB. This is just cash basis. I'd be looking at probably a $1 million surplus. And that's on a conservative basis, but that's the first out of the gate. We come back in October, we'll give you a lot more information. And when I say that on the general fund, public safety, police, we're looking at probably $200,000 ahead of budget, which could end up being a surplus, and then fire is just about $170,000. So we're looking pretty good. These next two slides are an example of a suggestion that came through that we implemented. These are both leading indicators. The columns show the traffic counts, and Public Works tracks all the traffic counts. And for me, this is a very valuable tool. So you also see a line in there. So the columns of traffic counts for both 23 and 21. There's 22s in there too, but the line is actually on the left-hand side is the tourism tax as it comes in. So what this does, the tourism tax in June that was collected at the point of sale is actually that line in June. So that is a direct correlation. So what that tells us next month when we get tourism tax, we should see another increase and stabilized, right, as we keep moving forward. You can also see August through December where that kind of drops but then levels out. And we ought to see that. So that tells us that our forecast last year for tourism tax was probably really low. On the right-hand side, sales tax is the same way. it kind of follows the same type of trend. In this case, we're 2 months behind. The state receives sales tax and pays it into us 2 months after the sale at the register. So in this case, it's even more important to get that leading indicator out. This was one that I've replicated in a couple of different places where they track traffic counts. And it was a great slide. The next was just additional information. This kind of shows where the growth in the city is. The existing, just on the left-hand side, it just shows the categories of the construction value when they file a permit in the planning office. And it just shows you where the construction value totals were. So grand total, just in July, compared to 22 to 23, we're looking at a fairly significant increase. And you can see the increase in new business. And I forgot to pull new business up and plug that in. But I could do that next meeting. The $1.6 million, it just shows the breakout of what the existing commercial expansion or renovations are, and what those are not small numbers. And I'm really curious about what that 2 million is. The next items on here are really cash balances. In the finance world, cash is king. The more you have, the better your rating is. That is directly opposite of how you talk to a resident about cash. You need to use it and put it to work. So there's a balance there. You guys are already talking about it with the water sewer fund. General fund, when you look at the orange versus the blue, orange is 22, blue is 23. It looks like a bad number, right? But remember, we moved over $1.3 million into our savings account that's not in that number to cash fund the ERP instead of leasing it, instead of borrowing money for it. So we're still above what our percentages are, our 30% fund balance. You see transportation and the next one's Branson Meadows, but the far right is the water and sewer fund. The small increase there. We're going to see some of that drop as capital come through. That's funded out of the water and sewer fund. Can you scroll down just a little bit more? The bottom two, cash balance, public safety, these are the public safety funds where they sit. They're still really healthy, and they expect to stay that way. Police and fire are looking pretty good. They're fairly stable in that sense. Now, fire is going to change as Fire Station 4 gets built. The city saved money over 2 years to be able to cash fund that facility, and that's what we're going to do out of these funds is cash fund it. Also plugged into fire, obviously, is what Kendall talked about, the public safety apparatus, the fire apparatus that we internally borrowed are in there. We've also got, I think, an apparatus coming off here in the next couple of years that we had bought. That'll be kind of nice to replace that with some of the new stuff. And the tourism fund, as you know, that is heavily capital. As we get projects kicked off, the 27 million is going to go down, obviously, and significantly, we hope, because that's what that fund is meant for. We've got a forecast right now we'll bring back to you that shows an estimate in 24 with the capital in a more adequate 11 million, $17 million range, which allows us to do even more capital, but we'll talk about that next month. So those balances are really healthy, and we're putting those to work for us as well. I think that's the last slide, is it? Yeah. Yeah, that is the last slide we've got. So what we do from here is this committee will get a joint session between the finance committee and the full board together, just like we did last year, to go over the budget. So we'll get both bodies in here, and we'll walk through the budget. We'll do the workshops, and we'll get those set up. But we'll have departments come back and kind of go through some of their higher points. Just like we did last year. Maybe a little more streamlined since we've done it before now. But they'll come back and talk to you guys about what's in the budget. But I'll get up and talk more about what the detail is behind the scenes, where our revenues are moving, what our expenses look like. Personnel obviously is a big issue nationwide. It doesn't matter whether it's government or it's private, wages have gone up, and we're not immune to that. And keeping up with those wages is a big deal, because in government now, you can go anywhere else. If they're higher than we are, then those folks can go. I've got one client that wasn't keeping up with wages in the fire department. They were losing firefighters to McDonald's. McDonald's went up to $16 an hour. Firefighters were $13. That was ludicrous. But that pressure is there now. Yeah. And you guys have done a great job attacking that right on its head and coming full force into that. And it's paying off. Whether others aren't doing that. Now, the things that we've got facing us now is health insurance, obviously is one of the things we got to watch for. Any of the other kind of consumables, the chemicals, like you had mentioned, the chemicals that Parks and Rec cover, capital. Capital is going to be a big deal, and it's going to stay a big deal because we have spent so many years not having the luxury to keep up with that maintenance. The one thing that has come up to me this year is really going to be above ground infrastructure. Streets, we're going to need a plan and funding for those streets. And I know Michael's got ideas that's going into this budget to be able to map that out and create or update the master plan to kind of give you guys and the board an overview of what that looks like into the future. But he's got the beginning stages of that in the '24 budget. I can't wait to get that kicked off either. So that's kind of what's in my head coming up in the future. It's going to be a fun ride this year to see what '24 looks like.
Couple quick things. Cindy tells me her chemical expense will be reduced because she's turfing
Yep, right.
fields.
Once she gets them built.
Ben, what's the process of the timing of when Moody's would re-rate Branson?
The rating agencies typically do an annual review, and they'll do a desk review without talking to their client. Just look at the former financials, plug in, whatever that looks like. But if we actively go to market, that's when they'll do it.
Okay.
So if,
Because, well, we're going to be actively going to market with the 76.
exactly.
CID.
Well, 76 will be a different deal because it's a different entity, potentially. But for the city, I would say like the police department.
Yeah.
That building's going to be a big one.
Yeah, okay.
And that'll be issued, that'll be debt issuance, it'll be rated. But the narrative before, the last time we were rated, is much different than what we've got now. So that's going to be a really fun conversation. And because I'm consulting with you, running the department with Cherie, I won't be the municipal advisor. I'll get somebody else that works with me to actually represent you through that process. SEC won't let me do both. It's kind of conflicting. But we've got folks that'll run us through that process that I work really close with. It'll be a good discussion.
Which means, not to put you on the spot, you would anticipate our rating would increase from the last time Moody's rated us.
I always expected AAA and never get it.
So double A.
I can't speak for them. You've got every argument to make for a rating increase. In this day and age, it's, again, cash, but more so the trend that we're seeing more tourists, more revenues coming in and stabilizing at that level. 2-3 years make a trend. The surpluses that come through in the general fund help, and we've maintained those surpluses a couple of years now. That helps that argument. Policies help. Consistency in the government as far as management's concerned and what all they've got in front of them. It's going to be a really good story, and we'll get Kathy and Alex involved. Not you. You're not going to want to do this, but we'll get Kathy and Kathy's Alex involved in this process, and Cherie, Jolyn, and I. And once we get there, it'll be a fun conversation. We've had a similar conversation with another client that had rating increased from an A1 to a AA+, which is right under a AAA, for some of the same reasons.
Yeah.
There's expansion in their economy, cash balances went up, and a plan for the future is already in place.
Very nice. Truly appreciate the education that you provide us. Any questions from any members on the board? Do you have more to report?
No, the only other thing I would say is the ERP is moving forward. Jolene, Sunday, and Tracy are back there. They're all three extremely important in this process. Jason Jones, back in our office, is a purchasing agent. He's in this mix too. We've had day-long meetings. Chad, thank God, has Cindy in his office that's the project manager on this. She has done a fantastic job for us. When we have questions, go to her. She's got the answer or she'll get it. She's very active. We've gone through what they call current structure, current state, future state. So the current state is, here's what we do, here's what our processes look like. Future state is, here's what we want them to look like. So we're going from tons and tons of paper in our office to hopefully, the goal is no paper, no Excel spreadsheets. That's our goal.
Wow.
And it may take us a few years to get there, right, Chad? But that's the goal.
It's a worthy goal. Like I
Yeah.
said, that ERP,
Yep.
not many understand what that means.
Right.
But I know putting all departments together and they're all communicating together, that's a long, long process, but it's a worthy goal and it's taken a lot of work.
It's an enterprise resource program, so that encompasses everything we do. It's not just a finance system. There's, probably half of it is going to be non-financial. It's just processes, permit processes, purchasing processes. It's more than just cutting a check and going through the system now. It's automating everything we do, and from next 2-3 years, as we move through this process, we're already seeing dividends in what we're going to do in the future and how this is going to work. HR, I think, kicked off here recently with some of their work, but Chad's been part of that process as well.
For the financial portion, our goal is to be online in April.
April.
So we're aggressively seeking that goal.
Good.
And Ben's assured me we're going to meet it, so.
Yeah, I promised him my daughter at MSU, her bill, he's got to pay that if we hit April.
Well, that's a worthy goal. And I don't want to speak out of school, but my understanding is when we get this all implemented, the community online on our website will be able to see basically the city's checkbook, right? I mean, as we're making payment, as we have revenues coming in, expenses going out.
There's a lot of configuration things to
Yeah.
talk through with that. Those modules are probably 24 months out because we stand the
Okay,
the
fair
core of
enough.
the system up first, so I want to set expectations. But there's a tremendous amount of features that will come with this, up to and including a whole new app for the community to use to register as vendors, pay bills, or, pay their utility bill, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's a whole new ballgame in Branson the next 24 months as it relates to technology
That
and
is so
leveraging it for our
exciting.
business. Yeah.
That is so exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Any,
That's all I've got, Mayor.
okay, any comments, questions? Michael, you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Good? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, double dog dare ya. Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.